There comes a moment when you realize you are no longer tired because life is hard. You are tired because you have been trying to carry what was never yours to carry. And somewhere inside, you already know exactly what I mean. You know the kind of tired I am speaking of, not the tired that sleep fixes, not the tired that disappears after a weekend away, or a little more rest, or another promise to yourself that next week you will finally slow down. This is a deeper weariness, a soul weariness, the kind that settles behind your eyes when you have spent too many years pushing, planning, proving, adjusting, fixing, waiting, hoping, and holding your breath for life to begin making sense. You have tried to be strong in all the ways the world taught you to be strong. You have stayed composed when you were aching. You have stayed productive when you were empty. You have remained hopeful when part of you was quietly crumbling. And because you are so capable, because you know how to endure, because you know how to keep going, even when your heart is begging for stillness, very few people have understood just how heavy it has been for you. But your heart knows, your body knows, your spirit has known for a long time. There is a kind of pressure that becomes so familiar you no longer recognize it as pressure. It begins to feel like responsibility, like maturity, like devotion, like survival. You tell yourself you are only trying to make things better. You tell yourself you are only being careful. You tell yourself you are only preparing, protecting, managing, staying ahead, staying ready. And yet all the while, your nervous system is braced, your jaw is tight, your breath is shallow, and your inner life feels like a room where no one has opened the windows in years. Have you noticed how exhausting it is to live as though everything depends on you? Not because you are arrogant, not because you believe you control the whole universe. Quite the opposite. Because somewhere along the way, you began to fear what would happen if you stopped trying to outrun pain. If you stopped predicting every outcome. If you stopped pulling on doors that were not opening. If you stopped over-explaining, over-giving, overworking, overthinking, overcorrecting. If you stopped forcing. And yes, I said forcing. Because that is what so many tender, beautiful, spiritually awake people have been doing without realizing it. Not forcing from cruelty, not forcing from greed, forcing from fear, forcing from longing, forcing because they wanted peace so badly, love so deeply, safety so desperately, that they thought if they pressed hard enough against life, life would finally yield. I know how sincere that effort has been. I know it came from a place that only wanted relief. I know you were trying to create a better life, a safer future, a more loving reality. And I know something else too. The forcing was never evidence of your failure. It was evidence of how frightened your heart had been to trust that you could be held by something larger than your own constant effort. Let that settle for a moment. You were never weak for getting tired. You were never broken for feeling burdened. You were never failing because ease did not come naturally to you. Some part of you learned that if you did not keep pushing, things would fall apart. some part of you learned that softness was risky. That rest was irresponsible. That letting go meant losing. That if you were not vigilant, life would forget you. So you became the one who remembered everything, the one who held everything, the one who checked, corrected, anticipated, prevented, endured. You became so skilled at carrying what was heavy that even when your soul began asking for release, your identity did not know how to loosen its grip. And that is where the deepest compassion is needed. Because many people will tell you to stop forcing as if it is simple. As if all you need is a better mindset. As if surrender is some beautiful little phrase you can repeat while your whole body is still terrified of what might happen if you unclench. But surrender is not a performance. It is not a spiritual accessory. It is not pretending to be peaceful while panic still rules your inner world. Real surrender is much more tender than that. It is the slow, honest moment when you admit that the way you have been living is hurting you, and you begin, little by little, to believe that life may not require your constant strain in order to love you. That is sacred. That is brave. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. Somewhere deep inside, you have always known there had to be another way. You may have felt it in brief moments, perhaps in the morning light when everything was quiet and your heart softened before the demands of the day began. Perhaps in nature, when you watch trees stand without striving, flowers open without urgency, tides move without permission. Perhaps in the middle of a hard season, when you were too tired to keep controlling everything, and for one small moment meant you let yourself stop. And in that stopping, something in you exhaled. Your heart already knows this. The things most meant for you cannot be bullied into arriving. Peace does not respond to pressure. Love cannot bloom in a clenched fist. Clarity does not come when you are chasing it through exhaustion. And abundance, real abundance, is not only about receiving more. It is about becoming available to what has been waiting for your readiness, not your relentless effort. This is important to hear. There is a difference between devotion and force. There is a difference between showing up for your life and trying to dominate it. There is a difference between taking loving action and gripping the future so tightly that the present can no longer breathe. And many beautiful souls confuse these things because the world rewards tension. The world applauds the one who never stops, the one who sacrifices rest, the one who keeps producing, keeps proving, keeps smiling, keeps making things happen. From the outside, forcing can look very impressive. It can look disciplined, responsible, strong, spiritual even. But on the inside, it often feels like fear dressed in elegant clothing. Have you felt that? Have you felt how easy it is to call something commitment when really it is anxiety? How easy it is to call something high standards when really it is fear of not being enough? How easy it is to call something being prepared when really it is a heart that has never felt safe enough to trust life's timing. You are not imagining this, and you are not alone in it. So many people are quietly living in this exact pattern. They are trying to manifest while secretly terrified, trying to heal while still at war with themselves, trying to receive while inwardly believing they must earn every blessing through effort, trying to rest while their body still believes rest is dangerous. And because these patterns are often praised by the world, many do not recognize them until the soul begins sending stronger messages. Messages like exhaustion, like numbness, like disconnection, like the sudden loss of desire to keep pretending, like doors closing no matter how hard you push, like relationships that no longer respond to your overgiving, like goals that once excited you now feeling strangely empty, like a life that says, very softly at first, and then more clearly, this way is no longer yours. That can be frightening, because when forcing has been your normal, release can feel like free fall. You may wonder, if I stop pushing, will everything disappear? If I stop controlling, will I fall apart? If I stop proving, will I be forgotten? If I stop making everything happen, will anything happen at all? These are tender questions, honest questions, human questions, and they deserve a gentle answer. What if the reason things began to open only after you stopped forcing was not because life was testing you, but because forcing had become the noise that drowned out your own guidance? What if your endless effort was not moving you closer, but keeping you too activated to notice what ye as actually aligned? What if surrender was never about losing your power, but about returning your power to its rightful place? Because true power does not strain. True power does not beg. True power does not run itself into the ground trying to prove it deserves to receive. True power is rooted, responsive, present. It knows when to move, when to rest, when to speak, when to wait, when to release, and when to trust. That kind of power is not loud. It does not panic. It does not chase every closed door. It does not make every delay mean rejection. It does not make every ending mean failure. It listens. It honors timing. It respects energy. It understands that what is for you does not ask you to abandon yourself in order to obtain it. And perhaps that is the deepest shift of all. You stopped forcing, and then everything came, because for the first time, you were no longer standing between yourself and what wanted to reach you. You were no longer flooding your own life with fear, no longer gripping every outcome, no longer crowding the sacred space where grace enters quietly, no longer telling the universe through your tension that you trusted struggle more than you trusted love. What if I told you that many of the things you were longing for needed your openness, not your pressure? Not because you had to become perfect, not because you had to master surrender in some flawless way, but because life moves differently when it meets a heart that is no longer armoring against disappointment. Life can reach you when you are reachable. Love can touch you when you are soft enough to feel it. Guidance can find you when your mind is not shouting over your intuition. Help can arrive when you no longer believe accepting help is failure. Rest can restore you when you stop treating stillness like weakness. And yes, this may stir grief. Because when you begin to see how much of your life has been driven by forcing, you may also begin to see how long you have been living in survival without calling it by that name. You may recognize the years you spent performing strength, the years you thought love had to be earned, the years you believed if you relaxed, something terrible would happen, the years you were so busy holding everything together that you never asked who was holding you. That grief is holy too. Do not rush past it. Do not judge it. Do not turn your tenderness into another project. Let it be what it is. A doorway, a soft breaking open, a return. Because this is not only about getting what you want. It is about becoming someone who no longer believes pain is the price of receiving. That is a sacred shift that changes everything. You have been carrying this for so long. The belief that more effort equals more love, that more vigilance equals more safety, that more strategy equals more worthiness. But your soul did not come here to spend its whole life proving it deserves to breathe. You did not come here to wrestle every blessing from the hands of the divine. You did not come here to live with your shoulders lifted toward your ears, your heart guarded, dead, your spirit overclocked, and call that normal. Your body already recognizes this truth. Even now, as you hear these words, you may feel something softening, a breath moving a little deeper, a quiet ache in your chest, a sense of being seen in a place you have kept hidden. That is not accidental. Something in you recognizes what is real, and once you recognize it, you cannot go back in quite the same way. You begin to notice the cost of force more clearly. You begin to feel how quickly your energy leaves you when you are trying to control what is not yours. You begin to sense which desires are clean and true and which are tangled up in fear. You begin to distinguish between inspired movement and panic movement. You begin to understand that not every action is aligned simply because it is active. This is where wisdom deepens, because surrender does not mean doing nothing. It means doing what is yours without trying to do what is not. It means tending to your life without trying to dominate the unfolding. It means taking the next honest step and then releasing the need to wring certainty from the future. It means being in sacred relationship with your own becoming instead of trying to whip yourself towards some imagined finish line. And that kind of relationship changes your entire life. You stop mistaking urgency for importance. You stop assuming every discomfort must be solved immediately. You stop chasing people who only choose you when you overextend. You stop trying to rescue outcomes that are collapsing under their own misalignment. You stop pouring precious life force into proving your value to those determined not to see it. You stop negotiating with your own exhaustion. You stop calling self-abandonment love. That is when things begin to arrive differently. Not always all at once. Not always in the exact form you expected, but in a deeper, truer way. The right conversations, the clear no, the surprising opportunity, the honest goodbye. The sense of inner steadiness you once thought would only come after the external world finally behaved. The realization that peace was not on the other side of perfect circumstances. It was on the other side of ending the war inside yourself. That is when everything comes. Not only the visible things, not only the outcomes you can point to, but the invisible treasures too. Relief, discernment, trust, self-respect, spaciousness, a nervous system that no longer flinches at stillness, a heart that no longer believes waiting is punishment, a soul that can finally hear itself again. And perhaps most precious of all, you come back to yourself. That self you left behind while trying to become who you thought life required. That self who was always intuitive, always tender, always wise beneath the noise. That self who knew forcing was not love, even when the world praised it. That self who longed for a softer way. That self who never wanted to dominate life, only to belong to it. This return is not dramatic. It is quiet, sacred, honest, like dawn arriving without asking for applause. And here is something most people do not speak about clearly enough. Forcing is not only a behavior, it is often an identity. It becomes the story of who you are. I am the one who makes it happen. I am the reliable one. I am the fixer. I am the strong one. I am the one who holds everything together. I am the one who can carry more. I am the one who will push through. I am the one who can survive anything. There is strength in that. Yes, real strength, hard-earned strength. But there is also loneliness in it. There is pain in being praised for your capacity while no one notices the cost. There is sorrow in being admired for how much you can bear when what your heart has wanted all along is to be allowed to set something down. If this touches you deeply, it is because some part of you is ready to live differently, ready to define strength differently, ready to let support become holy instead of shameful, ready to understand that receiving is not a moral failure, ready to see that you were never meant to carry all of life through effort alone. And that readiness matters, because life begins to meet you in new ways when you stop coming to it in a state of fight. People begin to reveal themselves more honestly when you stop chasing and start observing. Your intuition becomes clearer when you stop demanding answers on a timeline that fear created. Opportunities become more visible when you are no longer so focused on the ones that keep resisting. Even your body begins to respond differently when it senses you are no longer using it as a machine for relentless proving. Have you noticed how much clearer you become when you are no longer in pursuit mode? How much more you can feel when you are not constantly monitoring outcomes? How often the answer comes after you stop grasping for it? This is not magic in the shallow sense. It is deeper than that. It is the natural intelligence of life responding to a system that is finally willing to come out of defense. A flower does not open because someone yells at it. The morning does not arrive because the sky was pressured. The tide does not turn because the ocean was shamed into movement. There is an intelligence in all of life that moves through timing, readiness, conditions, rhythms, and seasons. And you, dear heart, are not separate from that intelligence. You are part of it. You have simply been taught to distrust it. So perhaps this season is not asking you to become more forceful. Perhaps it is asking you to remember the rhythm you forgot. The rhythm of breathing instead of bracing. The rhythm of listening instead of controlling. The rhythm of choosing instead of clinging. The rhythm of allowing instead of obsessing. The rhythm of honoring your energy instead of overriding it. The rhythm of partnership with life instead of combat against it. That rhythm may feel unfamiliar at first, even uncomfortable. Because if your body has been trained to equate tension with safety, then softness can be suspicious. Ease can feel undeserved. Waiting can feel like abandonment. Receptivity can feel lazy. But these are not truths. They are old imprints, old contracts, old protective strategies that once made sense and now need gentler conditions in which to release. I want to say this very clearly. There is nothing wrong with you if you do not know how to relax right away. There is nothing wrong with you if surrender feels harder than action. There is nothing wrong with you if your first response to uncertainty is tightening. These are not moral flaws. These are learned responses. And learned responses can be met with love, not with shame, not with punishment, not with spiritual superiority, with love. Love says, of course you learned to grip. Look at what you have lived through. Love says, of course your nervous system wants guarantees. Look at how often it felt unsafe. Love says, of course you tried to control outcomes. You were trying to protect a tender heart. Love says, and now we can choose differently. That is how transformation happens, not through forceful self-correction, through compassionate awareness. You begin by noticing. Noticing when your body tightens around the future. Noticing when you start over-explaining your worth. Noticing when you treat your own longing like a problem to solve instead of a truth to honor. Noticing when your actions are guided by inspiration and when they are guided by fear. Noticing when your yes comes from love and when it comes from panic. Noticing when you are moving with life and when you are trying to drag it. This noticing alone begins to change you. Because awareness creates space, and space is where grace enters. When there is no space, everything gets tangled. Desire tangles with fear. Action tangles with proving. Love tangles with attachment. Purpose tangles with performance. But when you create space, even a little, things begin to separate. You can feel what is yours and what is inherited. You can sense what is true and what is urgent. You can recognize where your soul is leading and where your conditioning is reacting. And that kind of clarity is not small. It is life-changing. I once knew someone who spent years trying to hold a relationship together with pure effort. She adjusted herself endlessly. She became more patient, more understanding, more available, more forgiving, more accommodating. She read every signal, decoded every silence, worked so hard to become easier to love, and the more she forced it, the emptier she became. One day she stopped, not dramatically, not with anger. She simply became too honest to keep calling self-erasure devotion. She stopped chasing, stopped fixing, stopped trying to earn what should have been freely given. And in the quiet that followed, grief came first, then clarity, then peace. What arrived after that was not only a healthier love, it was herself. She came back. That was the true miracle. Perhaps you have your own version of that story. Maybe it is a relationship. Maybe it is work. Maybe it is healing. Maybe it is the dream you kept trying to manifest by managing every detail. Maybe it is your own inner peace, which somehow remained just out of reach the harder you pursued it. Whatever form it has taken, the pattern is the same. The more fear drives the process, the more disconnected you become from the wisdom trying to guide it. The more you force, the less you can feel. The less you can feel, the more you rely on pressure. And the cycle continues until one day your soul says enough. That enough is sacred. It is not giving up. It is waking up. Waking up to the fact that your life is not meant to be a constant emergency. Waking up to the fact that your worth is not increased by suffering. Waking up to the fact that being chosen, being loved, being supported, being guided, being blessed, these things are not earned by depletion. Waking up to the fact that you can be devoted without becoming depleted. Waking up to the fact that your softness is not the enemy of your success. Waking up to the fact that rest is not the opposite of alignment. It is often one of its most faithful expressions. What if the life you want is not asking you for more force, but for more trust? Not naive trust, not performative trust, not pretending everything is fine when it is not. Real trust. The kind that says, I will meet what is mine to meet, and I will stop trying to control what has never been mine to command. The kind that says, I can be present without being panicked. The kind that says, I can desire deeply without clinging destructively. The kind that says, I will honor my effort and I will not worship it. This changes how you move through everything. You begin to take action from wholeness instead of fear. You send the message, have the conversation, apply for the opportunity, open your heart, make the choice, not because panic is pushing you, but because truth is guiding you. And after that, you release. You do not sit by the door, begging life to answer immediately. You do not interpret silence as proof of unworthiness. You do not turn every pause into a personal wound. You breathe, you wait, you listen, you continue living. That is power. You may notice as you practice this that many things begin to fall away. This is natural. Forcing often kept certain structures in place long after their integrity was gone. It kept you invested in misaligned relationships because effort felt noble. It kept you loyal to dead dreams because struggle felt meaningful. It kept you overcommitted because exhaustion felt virtuous. When force leaves, what remains must be real enough to stand without it. That can look like loss at first, but often it is liberation. If people disappear when you stop overgiving, they were feeding on your imbalance. If opportunities vanish when you stop abandoning yourself, they were built on self-betrayal. If identities crumble when you stop performing strength, they were never your home. And yes, that can ache, but it also clears the field. A cleared field is not empty in the way fear imagines. It is fertile. It is receptive. It is honest. It is where new life can finally take root without competing with old survival patterns. It is where what is truly meant for you begins to have room. Like a river that reaches the sea, not by strain, but by trust in its own direction, your life begins to move differently when you stop demanding proof and start making room. I want to speak for a moment to the part of you that still believes forcing is necessary because things have been hard. I honor that part. It is trying to keep you safe. It remembers disappointment. It remembers being let down. It remembers the times you relaxed and life still hurt. It remembers the times you trusted and were not met. It remembers the seasons when no one came, when no answer appeared, when all you had was your own determination. Of course, that part of you became intense. Of course, it clings. Of course, it mistrusts ease. It is not trying to sabotage you. It is trying to prevent the pain it has already known. So we do not shame that part. We thank it. We reassure it. We teach it gently that survival is not the only way to live. You might place your hand on your heart, even now, and feel the truth of that. There are parts of you that have been living on alert for so long, they do not know peace is allowed. There are parts of you that still think love must be maintained through effort. There are parts of you that believe if you stop scanning, something will be missed. There are parts of you that do not yet know they can rest and still be worthy. This is where healing becomes embodied, not abstract, not only philosophical, embodied. Because you do not stop forcing only in your mind. You stop forcing in your shoulders, in your breath, in your schedule, in your conversations, in the way you relate to waiting, in the way you define success, in the way you say no, in the way you stop volunteering your life force to every fear that knocks. Embodied surrender sounds like this. I do not need to answer immediately. I do not need to convince them. I do not need to make this person see my value. I do not need to anticipate every problem. I do not need to perform calm while secretly spiraling. I do not need to keep pouring into something that only survives through my depletion. I do not need to rush the answer. I do not need to betray myself to keep the possibility alive. Do you feel the relief in that? Even a little relief matters. Even one honest release matters. Because every time you interrupt the forcing pattern, you teach your system a new truth. You teach yourself that pause is possible, that discernment is possible, that softness is possible, that life does not immediately collapse when you stop gripping it with both hands. And over time, this becomes a new way of being. You begin to live from response instead of reaction, from trust instead of tension, from choice instead of compulsion. Your sensitivity is a gift. I want that phrase to rest inside you because so many people who force are actually deeply sensitive. They feel everything. They notice everything. They care deeply. They pick up on shifts, moods, energies, possibilities, dangers, nuances, and because they feel so much, they often learn to manage life aggressively in order to avoid being overwhelmed by what they sense. Their force is not evidence that they are disconnected. It is often evidence that they are exquisitely attuned and trying to protect that attunement from chaos. But here is what I have come to understand. That sensitivity you have been trying to control, tone down, or armor against is not a flaw. It is a form of intelligence. And when you stop using all your energy to defend against life, that sensitivity becomes guidance. It becomes discernment. It becomes compassion without self-erasure. It becomes intuition you can trust. It becomes a way of walking through the world that is deeply awake without being constantly overwhelmed. Your sensitivity is a gift, and gifts are meant to be honored, not managed with shame. Have you noticed how often forcing begins the moment you feel too much? A little uncertainty, and suddenly you are planning 12 steps ahead. A little distance from someone, and suddenly you are rewriting every conversation. A little silence, and suddenly you are deciding what it means. A little longing, and suddenly you are trying to make something happen. This is where tenderness is needed, because the moment you feel activated is not the moment you need more force. It is the moment you need more presence. Presence says, I notice I am afraid. Presence says, I notice I want control because uncertainty hurts. Presence says, I notice I am reaching because I feel unchosen. Presence says, I notice I am trying to fix this because stillness is bringing up grief. That level of honesty changes the entire field. Because once you can name what is actually happening, you no longer have to obey every survival impulse as though it were wisdom. You can sit with yourself. You can breathe. You can delay the message. You can step away from the decision. You can let the wave pass before you build your whole reality around it. You can ask, what is truly needed here? Sometimes what is needed is action. Sometimes it is a conversation. Sometimes it is a boundary. Sometimes it is a brave yes. Sometimes it is a clean no. But so often, what is first needed is not action at all. It is regulation. It is compassion. It is a return to center. And from center, life becomes clearer. From center, you can tell the difference between intuition and fear. From center, you can tell the difference between a calling and an obsession. From center, you can tell the difference between devotion and desperation. From center, you can tell the difference between surrender and collapse. This distinction matters because many people fear surrender because they confuse it with passivity. They think surrender means becoming indifferent, unmotivated, resigned. But surrender is not resignation. It is participation without domination. It is movement without grasping. It is deep care without controlling. It is making room for what is true without trying to manufacture certainty. You are still allowed to want what you want. You are still allowed to take steps. You are still allowed to pray, to dream, to build, to choose, to create, to love with your whole heart. Surrender does not ask you to become empty of desire. It asks you to become honest about where fear has wrapped itself around desire and turned longing into pressure. That is a sacred untangling. And the moment that untangling begins, you start receiving life differently. You notice kindness you were too tense to feel before. You notice opportunities that did not require exhaustion. You notice that some doors open naturally when you stop wasting years on the locked ones. You notice that your body speaks in whispers long before it has to scream. You notice that your peace has been trying to return to you over and over. You notice that not everything requires your intervention. You notice that what is aligned often comes with less drama, less confusion, less depletion than what you once chased in the name of passion. That does not mean everything becomes instantly easy. It means you stop creating extra suffering by fighting every moment that does not match your preferred timeline. You stop turning waiting into warfare. You stop turning uncertainty into self-attack. You stop turning desire into evidence of lack. You stop turning every closed door into a verdict on your worth. This is freedom, a quiet freedom, a mature freedom, a freedom that does not depend on perfect circumstances, because it was never built from circumstances in the first place. It was built from your relationship with yourself, with life, with timing, with trust. And trust grows slowly, like roots under the ground where no one can applaud them. You may not always feel dramatic progress. Some days the old urgency will return. Some days you will catch yourself gripping again. Some days you will still try to force clarity or reassurance or outcomes because the old pathways are familiar. That is all right. Healing is not proven by never tightening again. Healing is proven by how lovingly you return when you notice you have. Return to breath. Return to honesty. Return to the body. Return to the truth that you do not need to punish yourself for being human. Return to the truth that forcing is not your essence. Return to the truth that you can choose again. Every return matters. Every moment of awareness matters. Every small release matters. Because these moments accumulate, they become a new inner environment. And from that new environment, different things grow. You begin to attract from peace rather than panic. You begin to choose from self-respect rather than fear of loss. You begin to relate from wholeness rather than hunger. You begin to create from inspiration rather than overcompensation. You begin to rest without guilt. You begin to listen before leaping. You begin to trust your pace. You begin to believe that what belongs in your life can meet you without being dragged there by force. This is where abundance becomes quieter and more real. Not only money, though that may shift too. Not only opportunities, though those may come. Abundance as inner spaciousness, as enoughness, as no longer living in crony. See emotional scarcity. As no longer believing one unanswered message can destroy your peace. As no longer acting like every delay is a threat. As no longer starving yourself of rest, tenderness, or time because you are trying to outrun the feeling of insufficiency. Abundance begins in the nervous system long before it appears in external form. When your body no longer lives as though there is never enough time, never enough love, never enough certainty, never enough support, you begin to make different choices. You stop taking crumbs because you are no longer starving. You stop clinging to confusion because clarity feels safer than chaos now. You stop saying yes to what drains you because depletion is no longer your definition of devotion. You stop bargaining with your worth. You stop acting like love is scarce and peace is fragile and ease must be rationed. That is when life can give more to you, because you are no longer leaking so much energy into fear. You may begin to notice this in very practical ways. The right idea comes when you are in the shower, not when you are punishing yourself at your desk. The right words come after a walk, not after hours of mental spiraling. The right person calls when you have finally stopped rehearsing how to be lovable. The right direction becomes obvious after you stop trying to make the wrong one work. The body heals more easily when it is not being driven by chronic internal pressure. Many people find that gentleness supports their wellness journey in ways force never did, while still honoring the guidance of their bodies and healthcare providers. Life responds to congruence, and congruence becomes possible when you are no longer split between what you say you want and the fear-based way you are trying to get it. This is why so much comes when forcing stops. Because you become coherent. Your words and your energy begin to match. Your desires and your boundaries begin to match. Your prayers and your self-treatment begin to match. Your longing and your worthiness begin to match. Your actions and your truth begin to match. And coherence is magnetic, not in a shallow, marketed sense, in a soul sense, in the sense that life flows more cleanly through what is not internally at war. If you have been feeling as though nothing is working no matter how hard you try, perhaps this is worth asking. Am I trying to receive through a system still organized around fear? Am I trying to invite peace while secretly trusting struggle more? Am I trying to call in love while abandoning myself to keep connection? Am I trying to manifest with a body that still thinks life is unsafe? Am I calling tension drive and depletion commitment and self-betrayal patience? These questions are not meant to blame you. They are meant to free you. Because once you see the real pattern, you can stop fighting the wrong battle. The battle was never to become more worthy. The battle was never to control timing perfectly. The battle was never to make everyone stay, understand, choose you, or approve of you. The battle was to remember thee, that you were always allowed to come back into alignment with yourself, and that everything real would begin from there. That alignment changes the kind of love you accept. It changes the kind of work you do. It changes the way you speak to your body. It changes your relationship with time. It changes how you hear silence. It changes how you sit with desire. It changes what you no longer call normal. When you stop forcing, you also stop making yourself available for dynamics that depend on your over-functioning. This is one of the hidden miracles. Things that once seemed complicated begin to reveal themselves as unsustainable. People who once seemed magnetic begin to feel draining. Patterns that once felt inevitable begin to feel optional. You discover that much of what you called chemistry was actually activation. Much of what you called dedication was actually fear. Much of what you called patience was actually self-abandonment stretched out over time. This clarity is not cynical. It is liberating. You are not becoming closed. You are becoming honest. You are not becoming passive. You are becoming congruent. You are not losing your drive. You are releasing distortion. There is a difference. A person can be deeply alive, deeply committed, deeply loving, deeply purposeful, and still live without forcing. In fact, the purest forms of creativity, service, leadership, and intimacy often emerge only after force has been softened. Because force narrows perception. Force makes everything about outcome. Force disconnects you from nuance. But when you are no longer forcing, you can actually feel what the moment is asking. You can sense where life has opened and where it has closed. You can honor sacred timing rather than violate yourself in the name of urgency. This is wisdom in motion. And yes, sometimes it means waiting. That may be one of the hardest parts for many people. Not because they are impatient in a childish way, but because waiting has been loaded with old pain. Waiting has meant uncertainty. Waiting has meant helplessness. Waiting has meant feeling forgotten. Waiting has meant not knowing whether what you want will ever arrive. So they turn waiting into motion, into planning, into forcing, into constant mental activity, because movement feels better than vulnerability. But waiting, when held consciously, becomes something else. It becomes listening. It becomes gestation. It becomes preparation without obsession. It becomes trust with eyes open. It becomes the space where what is not right falls away and what is meant to deepen can gather strength. A seed in dark soil is not being punished. It is preparing. Dawn is not late because it has not yet arrived at midnight. It is simply not yet dawn. Water does not fail because it pauses in stillness before moving again. It is still water, still life, still becoming. Can you let that touch the places in you that have been so afraid of timing? Can you consider that not every delay is denial? Can you imagine that some things take longer because they are being shaped in ways you cannot yet see? Can you trust that your worth does not decrease in seasons that look quiet from the outside? This is where maturity in the spirit deepens, not in the loud moments, in the quiet ones, in the seasons where you are asked to become a different kind of strong. Not the strength that clenches, the strength that stays open, the strength that stays kind, the strength that stays present when there is nothing to perform, the strength that can sit in the unknown without rushing to become someone else. That strength is beautiful, and it is not cultivated by force. It is cultivated by relationship. Relationship with yourself, relationship with truth, relationship with the divine rhythms that do not hurry simply because fear wants guarantees. Somewhere deep inside, you have always known this. You have always known that the moments you felt most alive were not the moments you were gripping hardest. They were the moments you were most present, most connected, most real, most undefended, most willing to let life touch you instead of trying to dominate it. Perhaps you remember one of those moments now, a conversation where you felt truly seen, a stretch of time in nature where your mind finally quieted, a season when you laughed without effort, a day when you stopped over-managing and something beautiful happened anyway. A moment of prayer where you did not ask for control, only for peace. These moments matter because they remind you of who you are beneath the pattern. And beneath the pattern, you are not frantic, you are wise. Beneath the pattern, you are not desperate, you are devoted. Beneath the pattern, you are not starved, you are whole. Beneath the pattern, you are not abandoned. You are held in ways you are still learning to perceive. This is what forcing obscures. It obscures the subtle evidence that life is already in relationship with you. The quiet supports, the intuitive nudges, the timely pauses, the doors that close as protection, the energy you lose around what is misaligned, the peace that comes near what is true. The body's response, the heart's knowing. The way grace often enters not with spectacle, but with gentle consistency. When you are no longer at war with the moment, you begin to notice all of that. That noticing becomes trust. Trust becomes peace. Peace becomes alignment. Alignment becomes receptivity, and receptivity changes what can reach you. There is something else I want to say because it matters deeply. Sometimes people stop forcing and then things do come, but not always the exact things they had once begged for. Sometimes what comes is better. Sometimes what comes is more honest. Sometimes what comes is the loss of illusion, the return of dignity, the courage to walk away, the end of confusion, the beginning of a life you would never have chosen if your old patterns had stayed in charge. This too is a blessing. Do not make the miracle too narrow. The miracle is not always that life gives you exactly what fear demanded. Sometimes the miracle is that when you stop forcing, you finally become free enough to receive what love had been offering all along. That may be a new path, a new inner life, a deeper healing, a different relationship, a long-delayed rest, a new way of working, a body that feels safer inside itself, a spiritual practice that is no longer another arena for performance, a life with less drama and more truth. And perhaps, after a while, you look back and realize, this is what I was truly longing for. Not the old form, the deeper feeling beneath it. That is why surrender often feels both like loss and revelation. It loosens your grip on what you thought had to happen, and in that loosening, it reveals what your heart actually wanted underneath all the panic. Often the heart did not want control. It wanted safety. It did not want constant validation. It wanted belonging. It did not want endless answers. It wanted trust. It did not want to force love. It wanted to be met. And when you see that clearly, your prayers begin to change. Your choices begin to change. Your pace begins to change. You begin to ask less from fear and more from truth. You begin to say, show me what is real. Show me what is mine. Show me where I am still gripping. Show me what wants to grow if I stop interfering. Show me what supports peace, not only ego. Show me how to move with love instead of against life. These are powerful prayers because they open the field. And when the field opens, life can reorganize around what is true. This reorganization is not always comfortable. Old patterns protest. Old identities panic. Old habits whisper that you are falling behind. But you are not falling behind. You are falling into alignment. And from the outside, alignment can look less dramatic than force. It may look like slower choices, more pauses, more silence, more boundaries, less chasing, less performing. But inwardly, something profound is happening. You are coming into integrity. Integrity with your body. Integrity with your soul. Integrity with your needs. Integrity with your timing. Integrity with your values. Integrity with the truth that what costs you yourself is too expensive. That is a powerful line to remember. What costs you yourself is too expensive. Any relationship, any opportunity, any identity, any ambition, any version of love that asks for your disappearance. Any dream that requires chronic self-betrayal. Any pace that severs you from your own body. What costs you yourself is too expensive. When that truth becomes lived instead of merely understood, your life becomes very different. Simpler in some ways, richer in others, more peaceful, more honest, more spacious, less crowded with noise, less tangled with overcompensation, less dependent on outer chaos to feel alive. This can feel almost strange at first, because many who have been forcing for years are also accustomed to intensity. They associate love with intensity, purpose with intensity, progress with intensity. If it is not intense, they worry it is not real. But intensity is not always truth. Sometimes intensity is unprocessed fear colliding with desire. Sometimes what is real is much gentler than what has been familiar. Real love may feel steadier than you expected. Real purpose may feel quieter than you imagined. Real healing may feel less dramatic and more daily. Real abundance may arrive as consistency, not spectacle. Real spirituality may feel more embodied and less performative. Real peace may feel almost unfamiliar because chaos trained you to overlook it. And yet, once you taste it, something in you knows. This is different. This is cleaner. This is kinder. This does not ask me to fracture in order to participate. You deserve that kind of life. Not because you have finally done enough. Not because you have perfected surrender. Not because you have solved every wound. Because you are worthy of it now. Worthiness is present tense. That is important to hear. You are worthy of support now, worthy of rest now, worthy of clarity now, worthy of love that does not require acrobatics now, worthy of a pace that honors your humanity now, worthy of relationships where your truth does not threaten belonging now, worthy of work that does not devour your soul now, worthy of peace that does not depend on performance now. When you really let that in, forcing begins to lose its grip, because so much forcing was built on the hidden belief that worthiness was somewhere ahead. Somewhere after the achievement, after the healing, after the approval, after the outcome, after the transformation. But when worthiness returns to the present moment, striving relaxes. You stop running toward what was never withheld in the first place. This is what I mean when I say that when you stop forcing, everything comes. Not because the universe is rewarding your surrender like a transaction, because you become available to what was already trying to reach you, because worthiness returns, because clarity returns, because your inner life becomes hospitable to grace again. The gift of your sensitivity, the very thing you thought made you weak, is precisely how you'll transform everything you touch. Because sensitivity, when no longer ruled by fear, becomes wisdom in relationship. It allows you to feel when something is off before you have to suffer through it. It allows you to sense the places in yourself that need kindness. It allows you to notice beauty, timing, energy, and truth in ways that more defended people may miss. It allows you to live awake, but only if you stop using all of it to defend against possible pain. Awake is different from armored. Awake can receive. Armored can only brace. And perhaps that is the simplest way to say all of this. You stopped forcing because you were no longer willing to live armored as though that were the same as being alive. And in the moment you began setting the armor down, life could finally touch your skin again. Let that image stay with you, not because it is poetic, because it is true. So much of what you long for requires contact. Contact with your body, contact with your truth, contact with others. Contact with reality as it is, not only as fear interprets it. Contact with the sacred movement already present in your life. Armor blocks contact. Force blocks contact. Control blocks contact. And contact is where healing happens. Contact is where intimacy happens. Contact is where intuition deepens. Contact is where reality becomes discernible. This is why the path forward may feel less like conquering and more like listening, less like managing and more like meeting, less like acquiring and more like allowing. You might notice in the coming days that your body tells you immediately when you are forcing. A pressure in the chest, a tightening in the belly, a rush in the mind, a compulsion to fix, a need for immediate response, a craving for certainty that feels bigger than the actual moment. These are not signs that you are failing. They are invitations. Invitations to pause, to ask, what am I afraid will happen if I soften right now? What am I trying to secure through force that fear says cannot arrive through trust? What old story is waking up in this moment? These questions are medicine, not because they remove discomfort instantly, but because they bring you back into relationship with yourself. They stop the trance. They interrupt the automatic. They make it possible to choose, and choosing is powerful. You may choose rest. You may choose not to send the message. You may choose to let someone reveal their own effort level. You may choose to step back from a timeline that is strangling you. You may choose to stop proving and start observing. You may choose to release a fantasy that survives only through your overinvestment. You may choose to stop calling depletion normal. You may choose to trust the next honest step and leave the rest alone for today. These are not small choices. They are the architecture of a new life. A life where your nervous system is not constantly drafted into unnecessary battles. A life where desire can be tender instead of frantic. A life where love does not require begging. A life where purpose is sustainable. A life where your body is an ally, not a machine. A life where silence is not always interpreted as danger. A life where your soul does not have to keep sending exhaustion as its final language. That kind of life is possible, not as perfection, as practice, as devotion to truth, as repeated return. And every return changes you. Every time you choose presence over panic, you change. Every time you choose honesty over performance, you change. Every time you choose to let a closed door stay closed, you change. Every time you choose to stop over-functioning in order to be loved, you change. Every time you choose not to build your identity around endurance, you change. Every time you choose to trust that your worth is not hanging in the balance of one outcome, you change. This is how the old life loosens. Slowly, perhaps, but truly. The river does not become the sea in one dramatic leap. It becomes the sea by continual movement, by trust in direction, by honoring its own nature. In the same way, you come into a new way of living, not through one perfect act of surrender, but through many honest moments of release. One breath, one boundary, one pause, one truth spoke, and one pattern interrupted, one choice to stay with yourself, and then another, until one day you look around and realize, life feels different now. I feel different now. I am no longer chasing what wants me to disappear in order to receive it. I am no longer fighting timing every hour of the day. I am no longer mistaking tension for love. I am no longer worshiping exhaustion as proof that I care. I am no longer living like peace is something I must deserve through depletion. That realization is profound. It is not flashy. It is not always visible to others, but it changes everything from the inside out. And from there, outer life begins to reorganize in response. You may find that the people who are meant for this version of you meet you with less confusion. The work that suits this version of you asks for your gifts, not your sacrifice. The opportunities that fit this version of you do not require chronic self-abandonment. The healing that fits this version of you includes rest, support, and patience. The love that fits this version of you feels less like a test and more like a homecoming. This is what becomes possible when you stop forcing. And if you are still in the middle of learning this, if part of you still grips and struggles and fears and overdoes, please hear me. This has not disqualified you. You are not behind. You are not doing it wrong. The very fact that you can see the pattern now means something has already shifted. Awareness is already movement. Compassion is already movement. Honesty is already movement. The old way loses power the moment it is named with love. So let this be gentle. Let this be human. Let this be allowed to unfold. You do not have to turn surrender into another impossible standard. You do not have to perform softness. You do not have to become serene overnight. You do not have to force yourself not to force. You only have to become a little more honest, a little more kind, a little more willing to listen when your soul says, not this way anymore. That is enough for today. That is enough to begin. And perhaps, when you look back on this season months from now, you will recognize it as the turning point. Not because something outside of you dramatically changed overnight, but because this was the moment you stopped asking force to do what only trust could do. This was the moment you stopped treating your heart like a machine. This was the moment you stopped equating suffering with sincerity. This was the moment you let life meet you in a different posture. Open, honest, reachable, real. That posture invites a different world, not a perfect world, a truer one. One where you no longer need every door to open immediately. One where you no longer need every person to choose you. One where you no longer need every answer before you can breathe. One where you no longer need certainty in order to feel worthy. One where peace is not postponed until all the pieces finally line up. One where you can bless what leaves, honor what stays, release what confuses, and trust what deepens. That is abundance too. And in that abundance, something miraculous happens. You begin to understand that what comes after force is not emptiness. It is spaciousness. Spaciousness for grace. Spaciousness for discernment. Spaciousness for genuine desire. Spaciousness for the divine to move without having to push through all your fear first. Spaciousness for your own wisdom to be heard. Spaciousness is not nothing. It is fertile. It is alive. It is the room where new life forms. So if things have felt strangely quiet, if the old methods no longer work, if your soul is refusing to let you continue in the same tense way, perhaps this quiet is not failure. Perhaps it is the space before arrival. Perhaps it is the field being cleared. Perhaps it is the invitation you have been praying for, though it came in a form you did not expect. Can you let yourself be invited? Can you let yourself be loved in a way that does not require depletion? Can you let yourself be guided in a way that does not humiliate your humanity? Can you let yourself be seen without overperforming? Can you let yourself receive without apologizing? Can you let stillness be a friend? Can you let timing be wise? Can you let your body matter? Can you let your soul set the pace a little more often than fear does? These questions are not here to pressure you. They are here to open a door inside you. A door back to the self that remembers life can be met, not conquered. And as that door opens, you may feel grief, yes. For the years spent forcing, for the love you begged to stay, for the peace you postponed, for the exhaustion you normalized, for the tenderness you hid, for the body you overrode, for the seasons you survived by becoming harder than you ever wanted to be. Honor that grief. It means you are telling the truth now, and truth heals. Truth says, I did what I knew. Truth says, I was trying to survive. Truth says, it made sense at the time. Truth says, and I do not have to live that way forever. There is immense freedom in that. So let this be the moment you loosen your grip, soften your shoulders, and remember that what is truly yours does not need to be hunted down. It can finally find you now that you are no longer standing in the way of your own receiving. Maybe not all at once, maybe not in the form fear once demanded, but in the form love recognizes. A clearer mind, a steadier heart, a cleaner yes, a wiser no, a body that can rest, a life that does not require constant self-override, a love that meets you, a path that feels like truth, a peace that stays. This is not fantasy. This is what becomes possible when force is no longer the governing energy of your life. So when you feel the old pattern rise again, and it may, meet it gently. Notice the tension. Bless the fear. Breathe into the body. Ask what is needed. Choose the smallest, honest release. That is enough. One small release opens the way for another. One kind response creates room for another. This is how a new life is lived into being, not by domination, by devotion, not by panic, by presence, not by gripping, by relationship, not by becoming harder, by becoming truer. And as you become truer, everything changes. Not because you finally earned a softer life, but because softness was never the reward at the end of suffering. It was part of your nature all along. It was waiting beneath the armor, waiting beneath the proving, waiting beneath the urgency, waiting beneath the story that said love required labor and peace required perfection. Your heart already knows this. Something in you recognizes this. You have been carrying this. And now, you do not have to carry it in the same way anymore. Let that settle for a moment. Feel the breath moving through your chest. Feel the weight of all you have survived. Feel the tenderness of the truth now arriving. Nothing is being demanded of you in this moment. Nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing to fix right now. Only this invitation to trust that what is real will not require your disappearance, and what is yours can meet you in your wholeness. This is your transformation, not into someone else, back into yourself, back into the one who can love without losing herself, back into the one who can work without worshiping depletion, back into the one who can wait without collapsing, back into the one who can choose peace without calling it weakness, back into the one who can receive without guilt, back into the one who knows that life is not an enemy to be subdued, but a sacred field to be met with honesty, tenderness, and trust. And as you move forward from here, perhaps you will begin to notice something subtle and beautiful. Perhaps you will notice that the right things no longer need as much force, that the people who see you do not require endless explanation, that the work that fits you does not constantly drain your spirit, that your body relaxes around what is true, that your mind softens when you stop feeding it false emergencies, that your soul becomes louder when the noise of over-control grows quieter. These are signs, gentle signs, not of perfection, but of alignment. Follow them, honor them, let them teach you. Because the life that meets you in this posture, this softened, honest, grounded posture, will be different from the life built by force. And different is not something to fear. Different may be exactly what your soul has been asking for. So let the old urgency become a teacher instead of a master. Let the old fear become a doorway instead of a prison. Let the old identity of the one who holds it all become a story you bless and gently outgrow. Let the old exhaustion stop being your proof of devotion. You do not need to exhaust yourself to be sincere. You do not need to overextend to be loving. You do not need to suffer to be worthy. You do not need to force what is meant to flow. You do not need to become hard in order to survive a soft life. You are allowed to live differently now, and perhaps that is the most radical thing of all. Not the dramatic manifestation, not the sudden arrival of every dream, but the quiet, unwavering permission to stop living like tension is your only language. The permission to honor your humanity, the permission to let enough be enough, the permission to trust that your life can meet you without a fight. What a holy permission that is. Receive it, breathe it in, let it move through the rooms of your inner life that have waited so long for kindness. And when doubt returns, as it sometimes will, come back to this simple truth. What is aligned does not ask me to abandon myself in order to receive it. Hold that close. What is aligned does not ask me to abandon myself in order to receive it. Say it again inside your own heart, slowly enough that your body can hear it. What is aligned does not ask me to abandon myself in order to receive it. Let that become a touchstone, a lantern, a way home. Let it guide you when old patterns tempt you to chase. Let it steady you when fear tells you to grip. Let it remind you again and again that real life, real love, real peace, real purpose, they do not require your disappearance. They require your presence. And you are here now, present, breathing, listening, becoming. That is enough for this moment, more than enough. So trust this moment and the next one and the next small, honest choice. Trust the body when it says no more. Trust the heart when it says this is not how I want to live anymore. Trust the soul when it says slow down, be still, listen. Trust the grief when it rises, because grief is often love-making room. Trust the quiet when it comes, because quiet is often where what is real first makes itself known. And trust this too. The life that comes when you stop forcing is not less powerful. It is more alive, more precise, more intimate, more sustainable, more loving, more true. May you remember that. May you soften into that. May you stop mistaking urgency for truth. May you stop offering your life force to what only grows through your depletion. May you stop calling self-betrayal commitment. May you stop bargaining with your worth. May you stop gripping so tightly that grace cannot find room to land. And may you discover again and again that when you loosen your hold on what fear demanded, the deeper gifts begin to arrive. The gifts that nourish, the gifts that restore, the gifts that return you to yourself. The gifts that do not shout but stay. The gifts that feel like peace in the body, truth in the heart, clarity in the mind, and quiet joy in the soul. That is what I hope for you. Not a life without challenge, a life without unnecessary war. Not a life without desire, a life where desire does not become self-punishment. Not a life without effort, a life where effort is guided by love, not fear. Not a life without mystery, a life where mystery is not instantly treated as danger. Not a life where everything comes on command. A life where what comes can be received in wholeness. You are ready for that in ways you may not yet fully understand, because something in you is already choosing it. Something in you is already tired of the old way. Something in you is already listening more carefully. Something in you is already loosening. Something in you is already remembering, and that remembering is sacred. So rest here for a moment longer. Nothing is being withheld from your worth. Nothing real is threatened by your softness. Nothing aligned requires your panic. You are not behind. You are not too much. You are not too late. You are not losing by letting go. You are making room. And in that room, life can finally enter.